It was a chilly autumn evening when Shayna moved into her new house, an old Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town. The house had a reputation for being haunted, but Shayna dismissed it as local folklore. She was excited to start her new life in this beautiful, albeit slightly eerie home. On her first night as she was unpacking, she heard a faint melody drifting through the house. It was soft and haunting, like an old music box playing a forgotten tune. Intrigued, Shayna followed the sound, which led her to the attic. The door creaked open and she climbed the dusty stairs. In the dim light of her flashlights, she saw an old, ornate music box sitting on a dusty shelf. It was intricately carved with scenes of dancing figures and had an air of something ancient and forgotten. Sheena picked it up and turned the key. The haunting melody filled the attic, and she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. As she placed the music box back on the shelf, she noticed something strange. A small, worn diary hidden behind it. Curious, she opened it and began to read. The diary belonged to a young girl named Emily who had lived in the house over a century ago. The entry started out happy, but grew increasingly disturbing. Emily wrote about hearing the same haunting melody and seeing a shadowy figure watching her from the corners of her room. She described how the music seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The final entry was the most chilling. They come with the music. I can hear them now. They're getting closer. I don't know if I can escape. If someone finds this, beware the melody. Sheena's heart raced as she closed the diary. She heard the melody again, but this time it was louder, more insistent. It seemed to be coming from all around her. Panic set in as the room grew colder. She rushed downstairs hoping to escape the eerie tune. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw them. Shadowy figures emerging from the walls, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The melody grew deafening, filling her mind with fear. Figures surrounded her, their whispering voices blending with the haunting tune. Join us, they whispered. Stay with us forever. Sheena tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figures closed in and everything went black. The next morning, the real estate agent came to check on Sheena. The house was eerily silent. Inside, everything was in order except for one thing. The old music box sat on the living room table, playing its haunting melody. There was no sign of Sheena. Weeks passed, and the house remained empty, but the music never stopped. Locals swore they could hear it on quiet nights, and some even claimed to see a shadowy figure watching from the attic window. Years later, another family moved in, unaware of the house's dark history. On their first night, they found the music box and turned the key. The haunting melody filled the house, and the shadows began to stir once more. The diary remained hidden, waiting for the next curious soul to discover its chilling warning. They come with the music. Beware the melody. The old cabin loomed forebodingly against the bruised twilight sky. Inside, shadows danced in the flickering firelight, and the silence was broken only by the rhythmic creak of the rocking chair on the porch. Scarlett hesitantly approached the cabin, her heart hammering against her ribs. She shouldn't have come here alone. But curiosity, a persistent itch, had propelled her forward. Now regret gnawed at her. As Scarlett inched closer, the rocking on the porch stopped abruptly. A coldness, like a physical touch, slithered down her spine. She strained to see into the inky darkness that draped the porch. A low moan, almost inaudible, seemed to seep from the shadows. Terror coiled in her stomach, icy and sharp. She knew she should turn and run, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. Then, a sound, a dry chuckle devoid of humor. It sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over Scarlett. She stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. The rocking chair creaked back and forth, but there was nothing sitting in it. Panic clawed at her. She had to get out. Taking a shuddering breath, she spun around and fled into the gathering darkness, the mournful groan of the unseen rocking chair echoing in her ears. Scarlett had always been drawn to Blackwood Mountain. The locals whispered of a hermit who resided in a ramshackle cabin high up on its slopes, a man named Silas who was said to possess otherworldly knowledge. Curiosity, A trait that had often landed her in precarious situations had finally gotten the better of her. She'd hiked for hours, the dense forest growing darker and more oppressive with each step. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of decaying leaves and something else. A metallic tang that made her throat clench. Now, with the darkness pressing in and the rocking chair taunting her with its emptiness, Scarlett's bravado began to crumble. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. She stumbled over a gnarled root, landing hard on the damp earth. Scrambling to her feet, she renewed her frantic dash, the way back to her car seeming an eternity away. Then, a flicker of light pierced the gloom ahead. Hope surged through her. The cabin. The windows glowed with an unnatural yellow light, casting grotesque shapes that danced on the cabin walls. The rocking chair sat motionless on the porch, but a low, rhythmic chanting emanated from within. Scarlett hesitated, fear warring with a strange compulsion that drew her closer. Mesmerized, she took a tentative step towards the porch. The chanting grew louder, a guttural chorus of voices that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. As she reached the porch, the rocking chair creaked to life, swaying back and forth in a maddening rhythm. Scarlett froze, a cold sweat slicking her skin. The chanting stopped abruptly. A long skeletal hand emerged from the inky blackness of the doorway, beckoning her inside. Scarlett's scream died in her throat. Her body moved against her will, drawn toward the beckoning hand. The cabin door slammed shut behind her with bone-jarring thud. The stench inside was overpoweringly a sickly mix. Decay. Something far more disturbing. The room was lit by a circle of flickering candles, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed on the walls. In the center of the room, scrawled on the rough, wooden floor, in a crimson liquid that reeked of iron, was a symbol that sent a jolt of primal fear through her. It was the symbol from her nightmares, the one that had plagued her since childhood, a swirling vortex of darkness and madness. And now she was standing right in its middle. A figure detached itself from the shadows, tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned like embers. Silas regarded her with a chilling smile. "Welcome, Scarlett," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "You've finally come home." Scarlett's mind reeled. Home? What did he mean by home? Before she could voice her question, Silas raised a hand, silencing her. "The ritual is almost complete, child," he said, his voice laced with a dark glee. "And you are the final ingredient." A primal scream ripped from Scarlett's throat as she realized the horrifying truth. The rocking chair, the chanting, the symbol. It was all a lure, a trap designed to draw her. And now she was trapped, destined to become part of whatever unholy ritual Silas had planned. The antique gramophone sat nestled amongst the dusty curiosities in the corner of the shop. Its polished mahogany gleamed faintly in the afternoon light, filtering through the grimy windows of oddities and ends. Intrigued, Clara reached out, her fingertips tracing the intricate carvings on its curvaceous horn. A sense of foreboding washed over her, a prickling unease that sent shivers down her spine. The proprietor, a hunched old man with rheumy eyes that seemed to hold untold secrets, shuffled towards her. "Ah, the Orpheus." His voice rasped like dry leaves. "A fine piece. Plays the sweetest melodies, doesn't it?" Clara swallowed, a sudden dryness constricting her throat. "It doesn't look like it works," she managed, forcing a smile. The old man chuckled, a sound devoid of mirth. "Oh, it works all right, miss. It works wonders. But only for those who know the right song." Intrigued despite herself, Clara inquired about the gramophone's history. The old man's smile widened, revealing a disconcerting glint in his eyes. He spoke of a traveling musician who had wandered into the shop years ago, peddling the gramophone with tales of its otherworldly music. Melodies, he claimed, that could grant wishes or unlock forgotten memories. The story sent a shiver down Clara's spine. Memories? She had a box full of them, locked away in the attic, gathering dust. fragile fragments of a past she desperately craved to revisit. A past overshadowed by the disappearance of her younger sister Lily 10 years ago. The gramophone seemed to thrum with an unseen energy, beckoning her. In a moment of reckless impulse, Clara purchased it, the shop owner's cryptic words echoing in her ears. That night, back in her old Victorian house, Clara carefully wound the gramophone's mainspring, a strange anticipation knotting in her stomach. Placing a chipped record on the turntable, she cranked the handle. The music box whirred to life, but instead of a melody, a distorted voice filled the room. A voice that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of time itself. The voice spoke in a language Clara didn't understand, yet it sent a jolt of recognition through her. It was Lily's voice, a fragment of a childhood song they used to sing together. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, a bittersweet pang of longing twisting in her heart. As the voice continued, a kaleidoscope of images flooded her mind. Flashes of a carnival, the scent of cotton candy, and then darkness. An abandoned house on the outskirts of town, the place where Lily was last seen. The music abruptly stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. Clara, her heart pounding, raced to the attic, the gramophone's voice echoing in her head. In the dusty attic, she unearthed the box of her childhood memories. Trembling fingers pried it open, the musty scent of forgotten years filling the air. Photo after photo materialized, each one a fresh stab of grief. And then, a picture tucked away at the bottom, a worn flyer for a traveling carnival that had come to town the summer Lily vanished. On the back, a chilling message scrawled in childish handwriting. "Help me. They took me." A cold dread seeped into Clara's bones. The carnival. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. The gramophone, the distorted voice. It was a message, a plea from Lily. But what had happened at the carnival? Who had taken her? Fueled by a renewed determination, Clara set out to revisit the abandoned carnival grounds, the gramophone clutched tightly in her hand. The place was a desolate wasteland. The remnants of rides twisted into grotesque shapes by neglect. As the wind howled through the skeletal framework of the roller coaster, Clara felt a presence watching her. Suddenly, the gramophone began to emit a faint, mournful melody. The distorted voice whispered, beckoning her deeper into the overgrown maze of tents and broken mirrors. Clara, her heart hammering against her ribs, followed the spectral song, a cold sweat clinging to her skin. The music led her to a dilapidated funhouse, its gaping maw a dark, inviting vortex. With a deep breath, Clara stepped inside, the gramophone clutched in her hand. The air inside was thick with dust and the stench of decay. The only light came from slivers of moonlight filtering through cracks in the boarded-up windows. As she ventured deeper, the distorted voice grew louder, morphing into a desperate plea for help. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with eyes that glowed like embers. He wore a tattered carnival mask, a grotesque parody of a clown. Its oversized grin was painted in a sickly shade of green, and blood-red tears streamed down its cheeks. Clara's scream died in her throat. This wasn't some monster from her nightmares, but something far more sinister, a twisted reflection of the joy and wonder clowns were supposed to represent. In that moment, Clara knew this wasn't just about finding Lily anymore. It was about stopping whatever evil lurked within the funhouse, the evil that had stolen her sister and countless others. The gramophone's music swelled, a defiant melody against the oppressive silence of the decaying funhouse. Clutching it tightly, Clara squared her shoulders and prepared to face the horror that awaited her. The dense canopy of the whispering woods swallowed the last rays of twilight, casting long skeletal shadows that danced across the forest floor. A lone hiker, Farah, pushed on, her boots crunching on a carpet of fallen leaves. She was hopelessly lost, a wrong turn miles back leading her astray from the marked trail. Panic gnawed at the edges of her resolve, but surrendering to fear wasn't an option. As darkness solidified, the forest transformed into a labyrinth of menacing shapes. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down her spine. The air grew colder, heavy with an unsettling stillness. Then, a flicker of light pierced the gloom ahead. Hope surged through Farah. Perhaps it was a cabin, a refuge from the encroaching night. Quickening her pace, she stumbled towards the light. It emanated from a clearing where a lone cabin sat nestled amidst the towering trees. Smoke curled from its chimney, painting streaks of gray against the inky black sky. Relief washed over Farah, momentarily eclipsing the prickling unease that snaked down her spine. The cabin looked abandoned, yet undeniably inviting. With a deep breath, Farah cupped her hands around her mouth and called out. Silence. Hesitantly, she approached the creaky wooden door. To her surprise, it swung open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit interior. The cabin was sparsely furnished, but a fire crackled merrily in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows of light on the walls. A single pot bubbled on a cast-iron hook, suspended above the flames. An old woman sat hunched over in a rocking chair by the fire, her gnarled hands wrapped around a steaming lung. The woman looked up, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light in the firelight. A jolt of primal fear shot through Farah, but before she could turn and flee, the woman spoke. Her voice was a raspy whisper that sent shivers down Farah's spine. Lost child? The woman's smile was a chilling display of sharp teeth. Come in, come in. Warm yourself by the fire. Despite her misgivings, Farah's body craved the warmth. She stepped inside, the heavy wooden door slamming shut behind her with a sickening thud. The woman gestured towards a chair across from the fire. Farah sat, her gaze darting around the room, taking in the dusty shelves overflowing with antique trinkets and ornately framed pictures with faces that seemed to leer back at her. You look weary, child, the woman rasped, her voice laced with a false sympathy. You must be hungry. She ladled a steaming broth from the pot into a chip bowl and pushed it toward Farah. The aroma was enticing, but a sliver of suspicion kept Farah from touching the bowl. What's in it? She managed to ask, her voice barely a hoarse whisper. The woman's smile widened, revealing a glimpse of something dark and monstrous lurking behind her seemingly harmless facade. Just a little something to help you forget your troubles, she purred. The fire crackled, and for a fleeting moment, Farah thought she saw faces contorted in silent screams reflected in the flames. Terror coiled in her stomach, icy and sharp. She knew she couldn't stay here. With a surge of adrenaline, Farah bolted for the door, but as she reached for the handle, it vanished, replaced by rough wooden planks that seemed to materialize out of thin air, sealing the exit shut. Panic clawed at her throat as she spun around to face the old woman, who now stood impossibly tall, her eyes burning with an infernal light. Nowhere to run, child, the woman cackled, her voice morphing into a chorus of chilling whispers. You'll make a lovely addition to my collection. Farah's scream echoed through the cabin, a desperate plea swallowed by the suffocating silence of the woods. The firelight danced, casting grotesque shadows that writhed on the walls. A horrifying spectacle as Farah realized she wasn't just lost, she was trapped in a nightmare, and the old woman was the monstrous architect. The abandoned elementary school loomed on the outskirts of town, a hulking monument to a bygone era. Faded murals of smiling children and playful animals peeled from the brick facade, their cheerfulness a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that hung heavy in the air. Around Cassie, overgrown grass choked on the playground, and the swing swayed gently in a non-existent breeze. Cassie wasn't supposed to be here. The locals spoke of the school in hushed tones, a place marred by a tragic fire years ago that claimed the lives of several children and a beloved teacher, Mr. Thomas. But Cassie, fueled by a thirst for exploration and a healthy dose of teenage rebellion, decided to see it for herself. The air inside the school was thick with dust motes, dancing in a shaft of sunlight that speared through a broken high window. The once bright classrooms were now repositories of forgotten dreams. Desks piled high with cobweb-draped textbooks and papers yellowed with age. An unsettling quiet permeated the halls, broken only by the rhythmic creak of floorboards under Cassie's hesitant steps. As she ventured deeper, a faint melody reached her ears. A haunting tune played on a music box. Curiosity piqued. Cassie followed the sound to a room at the end of the corridor. The door hung ajar, revealing a scene both unsettling and strangely beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the broken window, illuminating a circle of dust motes that danced in a mesmerizing waltz to the melody of the music box. In the center of the circle sat a little girl, no older than 8, her back to Cassie. She wore a faded yellow dress, the style reminiscent of a bygone era. The girl's long dark hair cascaded down her back, and she seemed completely oblivious to Cassie's presence, her entire focus on the music box in her lap. A strange sense of nostalgia washed over Cassie, a memory of a childhood song half forgotten. Tentatively, Cassie stepped forward. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing eerily in the silent room. The music box abruptly stopped, and the girl spun around. Kathy's breath hitched. The girl's face was a mask of porcelain, devoid of features, blank eyes and a smooth, featureless expanse where a nose and mouth should have been. Yet a single tear rolled down her cheek, a glistening anomaly on the otherwise inanimate surface. Terror flooded Cassie's veins. She stumbled back, knocking over a stack of old books with a deafening crash. The sound seemed to shatter the strange stasis that had held the room captive. The girl's head snapped toward the fallen books, and for a horrifying moment, Cassie swore she saw a flicker of something dark and monstrous behind the blank facade. The girl let out a blood-curdling shriek, a sound that ripped through the silence like a banshee's wail. In a blink of an eye, she was across the room, her porcelain hand reaching for Cassie's throat. Cassie screamed, scrambling back and tripping over a loose floorboard. She landed hard on the dusty floor, the smell of mildew stinging her nostrils. The porcelain girl loomed over her blank face inches from Cassie's. Just when Cassie thought all hope was lost, a deafening roar echoed through the building. A section of the ceiling crumbled, showering the room in dust and debris. The porcelain girl recoiled, a screech of fury escaping her. Cassie seized the opportunity, scrambling to her feet and dashing for the exit. She didn't look back, the porcelain girl's chilling screams echoing behind her as she fled the abandoned school. Back in the safety of sunlight, Cassie collapsed against the rough brick wall, gasping for breath. She had escaped, but the horrifying image of the blank-faced girl was burned into her memory. Cassie knew she wouldn't speak of what she saw in the abandoned school. Some things were best left buried, along with the forgotten memories that lingered within its dusty halls. But as she walked away, a single chilling question echoed in her mind. Was the porcelain girl a vengeful spirit, or something far more sinister, a fragment of a forgotten nightmare, awakened by the melody of a music box? In the quaint town of Willow Creek, nestled between mist-shrouded hills and ancient forests, there stood an old mansion known as Ravenwood Manor. Its towering spires and ivy-covered walls spoke of a bygone era, when its halls echoed with laughter and music. Now, it lay abandoned and forlorn, its windows boarded up, a shadow of its former grandeur. Legend whispered that Ravenwood Manor held a dark secret, a mirror said to be cursed. The Mirror of Souls, as it was called, was said to reflect not just the physical form, but the true essence of those who dared to gaze into it. Many claimed it had driven its owners mad or brought them to untimely ends. One stormy night, a group of thrill-seekers, Ophelia, Parker, and Tanya, decided to explore Ravenwood Manor, drawn by tales of the mirror's eerie power. Armed with flashlights and nerves of steel, they slipped through a gap in the fence surrounding the estate and crept towards the imposing manor. The wind moaned through the trees as they entered through a broken window, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Dust motes danced in the beam of their flashlights, and the air was thick with the musty scent of neglect. They moved cautiously, as if the very walls were watching them with malevolent intent. They found the mirror in a grand, dusty chamber at the heart of the mansion. Its ornate frame gleamed dully in the dim light, and its surface was cloudy with age. Ophelia approached first, her reflection wavering uncertainly as she peered into the glass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if stirred by some unseen force, the mirror began to shimmer. Ophelia gasped as her reflection changed, her features contorting into a grotesque mask of anguish. She stumbled back, her heart pounding with fear, as Parker and Tanya rushed to her side. "It's just a trick of the light," Parker said, his voice trembling slightly. but Tanya's expression was troubled as she stepped forward, unable to resist the lure of the mirror's dark promise. As Tanya gazed into the mirror, her reflection remained eerily still. For a long moment, nothing happened, and the others held their breath. Then, slowly, Tanya's reflection began to smile. A cold, malevolent smile that sent a chill down her spine. "Get away from it," Ophelia cried, but it was too late. Tanya's eyes widened in horror as her reflection reached out from the glass, its fingers curling like claws. With a scream, Tanya stumbled backward, breaking the connection just as the mirror seemed to pulse with an inner light. They fled from Ravenwood Manor, their hearts racing and minds reeling from what they had witnessed. But the mirror's curse had already taken hold. Tanya began to change, her once cheerful demeanor replaced by a brooding intensity. Shadows seemed to follow her wherever she went, and she spoke of whispers that haunted her dreams. Ophelia and Parker tried to convince themselves it was just their imaginations, but the unease lingered. One evening, as they gathered in Parker's apartment, they received a call from Tanya. Her voice was hollow, distant, as if she were speaking from another world. "I can't resist it anymore," Tanya whispered. "I have to go back." Before they could stop her, Tanya hung up the phone. They rushed to Ravenwood Manor, arriving just as the storm broke overhead. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the mansion in ghostly flashes. Inside, they found Tanya standing before the Mirror of Souls, her eyes vacant and fixed on her reflection. The mirror seemed to pulse with a sinister glow, casting strange shadows around the room. Ophelia and Parker called out to her, pleading with her to turn away, but she did not respond. As they approached, a chilling wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing their flashlights. In the darkness, they heard Tanya's voice, cold and detached. "It's too late for me," she said softly. "I belong to the mirror now." With a final desperate cry, Ophelia lunged forward and smashed the mirror with a heavy candlestick. The glass shattered with a deafening crash and Tanya collapsed to the floor, her eyes closing as if released from a trance. They had carried Tanya out of Ravenwood Manor, her body limp and her breathing shallow. The storm raged around them as they raced through the woods, their hearts heavy with sorrow and relief. In the days that followed, Tanya slowly returned to herself, the darkness that had consumed her fading like a nightmare at dawn. They never spoke of the Mirror of Souls again, but Ravenwood Manor stood as silent sentinel, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and memory. Yet sometimes on stormy nights, when the wind howls through the trees and lightning flickers in the sky, residents of Willow Creek swear they can still hear whispers echoing from the old mansion, a reminder of the mirror's malevolent power and the souls it claimed. Nestled at the edge of a dense forest, where gnarled trees intertwined like twisted fingers against the moonlit sky, loomed Blackthorn Manor, a mansion steeped in a dark history. Its looming silhouette in overgrown gardens whispered tales of tragedy and despair that had plagued its inhabitants for generations. The latest owner, Thomas Blackthorn, had inherited the manor under mysterious circumstances. Tall and brooding with piercing eyes that seemed to bore into your soul, Thomas was a recluse who rarely ventured beyond the manor's walls. Rumors swirled about his reclusive nature and the strange lights that flickered in the windows at night. One autumn evening, a group of curious college students, Gemma, Nathaniel, and Lila, were determined to unravel the mysteries of Blackthorn Manor. They were armed with cameras and a determination to uncover the truth. They slipped through a gap in the iron gate that creaked ominously behind them. The manor loomed before them, its grandeur faded yet imposing. Ivy crawled up its crumbling walls, and the once manicured gardens had run wild with weeds. As they approached the front door, a chill wind swept through the overgrown courtyard, sending leaves swirling in their wake. With hearts pounding, they pushed open the heavy oak door, its hinges groaning in protest. The air inside was heavy with dust and the scent of decay, and cobwebs hung like veils from the ceiling. They moved cautiously through the foyer, their footsteps echoing on the cold stone floor. Their exploration led them through the shadowy corridors and dimly lit rooms adorned with faded tapestries and antique furniture draped in white sheets. Each room seemed to whisper of forgotten secrets and untold horrors. But it was the library that drew them in, a vast chamber lined with shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. As Gemma scanned the titles, her attention was drawn to a particularly old book nestled in the back of a shelf. Its cover was worn and weathered, and its pages crackled with age as she opened it. The text was written in a language she didn't recognize, filled with strange symbols and diagrams that seemed to dance before her eyes. Nathaniel and Lila explored further, their voices hushed as they marveled at the intricate carvings on the wooden panels and the eerie portraits that seemed to watch their every move. But as they ventured deeper into the manor, they became aware of a faint, haunting melody that seemed to drift through the air, a mournful tune that echoed with sorrow and longing. Following the sound, they found themselves in a forgotten ballroom, a vast chamber with a grand chandelier that hung like a cobwebbed spider from the ceiling. The melody grew louder, wrapping around them like a spectral embrace, as they realized it emanated from an old gramophone in the corner of the room. Lila approached the gramophone cautiously, her fingers trembling as she lifted the needle and placed it on a dusty record. The music swelled, filling the room with its haunting melody, a tune that spoke of lost love and shattered dreams. As they listened, the air seemed to thicken with unseen presences, and shadows danced along the walls in time with the music. Suddenly, a figure materialized at the far end of the ballroom, a woman in a flowing gown, her face obscured by shadows. She moved with an ethereal grace, her movements synchronized with the melancholy strains of the music. Gemma, Nathaniel, and Lila watched in stunned silence, unable to tear their eyes away from the ghostly apparition. The woman's form flickered like a candle in the wind, her features shifting as if caught between moments in time. With a mournful sigh, she reached out toward them, her eyes pleading and full of sorrow. And then, as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished into thin air, leaving only the echo of her song lingering in the silence. Shaken to their core, Gemma, Nathaniel, and Lila fled from Blackthorn Manor, their minds racing with questions and their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. They never returned to the manor, but the haunting melody and the image of the mysterious woman haunted their dreams for years to come. As for Thomas Blackthorn, he remained a reclusive figure, his dark secrets buried within the walls of the manor, and Blackthorn Manor itself stood as a silent witness to the tragedies that had unfolded within its walls, a place where the past and present intertwined in a haunting dance of memory and regret. In the heart of the city, where towering skyscrapers reached toward the sky like glass and steel giants, stood an old museum known as the Whitmore Gallery. Its grand facade and intricate stone carvings spoke of a time long past when art and culture flourished within its walls. Yet beneath its polished exterior lay a dark secret, the gallery haunted by whispers from another realm. Penelope, a young art historian with a passion for uncovering forgotten stories, had always been drawn to the Whitmore Gallery. Rumors swirled among the staff and visitors alike about strange occurrences after dark. Flickering lights, cold drafts that seemed to defy explanation, and whispers heard in the stillness of the night. One fateful evening, Penelope was given the opportunity to explore the gallery after hours, tasked with cataloging a newly acquired collection of ancient artifacts. Excited, yet apprehensive, she armed herself with a notebook and flashlight, her steps echoing on the marble floors as she ventured deeper into the silent corridors. The museum seemed to hold its breath as Penelope entered the main gallery, a vast chamber filled with statues of marble and bronze, their serene faces illuminated by the soft glow of moonlight filtering through stained glass windows. She paused before a particularly striking sculpture, a figure of a woman with eyes that seemed to follow her every move. As Penelope worked, meticulously recording each artifact, she became aware of a faint rhythmic sound, a soft whisper that seemed to echo through the gallery like a ghostly chorus. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. But as she listened closer, the whispers grew louder, weaving around her like a veil of mist. Curiosity mingled with unease. Penelope followed the whispers to a secluded corner of the gallery, a forgotten alcove hidden behind a curtain of velvet. There, bathed in the dim light of a solitary lamp, stood a tall, ornate mirror, framed in gold and ebony. Its surface was clouded with age, yet it seemed to shimmer with an inner light, as if beckoning her closer. Drawn by an irresistible pull, Penelope approached the mirror cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. As she gazed into its depths, her reflection wavered uncertainly before solidifying into a clear image. But it was not her own face that stared back at her. It was the face of a woman, her features ethereal and hauntingly beautiful. "Who are you?" Penelope whispered, her voice barely audible over the whispered chorus that surrounded her. The woman in the mirror smiled faintly, her lips moving in silent reply. Penelope strained to hear, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and fascination. The whispers grew louder, swirling around Penelope like a whirlwind of voices from another world. They spoke of lost loves and forgotten dreams, of tragedies that had unfolded within the walls of the gallery. Penelope's head spun with the weight of their sorrow, yet she couldn't tear herself away from the mirror's spell. Suddenly, the temperature in the gallery plummeted, and icy tendrils seemed to coil around Penelope's limbs. Shadows danced along the walls, taking on eerie shapes that twisted and writhed in the flickering light. The air crackled with an electric tension as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling around her. Desperate to break free from the mirror's grip, Penelope stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned and fled through the gallery, the whispers echoing in her ears like a haunting melody. Behind her, the mirror shimmered in the darkness, its secrets hidden once more behind a veil of mystery. Days passed, but Penelope could not shake the memory of the whispering gallery. The whispers haunted her dreams, their voices mingling with the echoes of the past. She returned to the gallery during daylight hours, hoping to find answers to the questions that plagued her mind. But the mirror remained silent and still, its surface reflecting only her own troubled expression. The museum staff dismissed her concerns, attributing the whispers to an overactive imagination or the creaks and groans of an old building. Yet Penelope knew the truth lay deeper, buried within the whispers that had touched her soul. Years later, when asked about her experience in the Whispering Gallery, Penelope would simply smile knowingly. She had glimpsed something beyond the realm of the living, something that defied rational explanation, and the Whitmore Gallery continued to stand as a testament to the mysteries that lurked within its hallowed walls. A place where the past whispered secrets to those who dared to listen. Nestled deep within a secluded forest, surrounded by towering pines and shimmering lakes, lay Peaceful Pines Camp, a place of laughter and adventure during the day, but a realm of shadows and whispers at night. For generations, children had flocked to its cabins and bonfire circles, unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath the tranquil surface. One summer, a group of counselors, Alan, Una, and Bart, arrived at Peaceful Pines Camp with eager smiles and hearts full of excitement. They were tasked with overseeing the children's activities and ensuring their safety during their stay. Little did they know, they would soon encounter something beyond their wildest nightmares. The campgrounds bustle with life during the day. Children splashing in the lake, hiking through the trails, and roasting marshmallows around crackling fires. But as dusk settled over Peaceful Pines, an eerie stillness descended upon the forest, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of leaves in the breeze. One night, after tucking the children into their cabins and bidding them goodnight, Alan decided to explore the campgrounds. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, he wandered along the wooded paths, the moon casting long shadows across the forest floor. As Alan approached the edge of the lake, a chill wind swept through the trees, sending shivers down his spine. He paused, his senses on high alert, as he caught a faint whisper on the breeze, a voice so soft and melancholy it seemed to be carried from another world. "Help me," the voice whispered, barely audible, yet unmistakably pleading. Alan spun around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was no one in sight. The campgrounds lay still and silent, the cabins dark and serene under the canopy of stars. Shaken but determined to dismiss the unsettling encounter as a trick of the wind, Alan continued his exploration. He ventured deeper into the forest, following a narrow trail that led to an abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. Its weathered boards creaked in the night air, its windows dark and foreboding. Curiosity outweighing caution, Alan approached the cabin. The air around him seemed to thicken with an oppressive weight, and the whispers grew louder, echoing through the stillness like a haunting refrain. He hesitated at the threshold, a sense of dread coiling in the pit of his stomach. Just as he reached out to push open the cabin door, Una's voice called out from behind him, breaking the trance-like spell. Startled, Alan turned to see Una and Bart hurrying toward him, concern etched on their faces. "What are you doing out here alone?" Una asked, her voice edged with worry. Alan hesitated, unsure how to explain the inexplicable pull that had drawn him to the abandoned cabin. Before he could respond, Bart pointed toward the woods beyond. "Do you hear that?" Bart whispered, his gaze fixed on a distant clearing where shadows danced in the moonlight. A figure emerged in the darkness. A child, pale and translucent, her ethereal form flickering like a candle in the wind. She moved with a haunting grace, her eyes fixed on Alan with a silent plea for help. The whispers around them swelled, a chorus of lost souls trapped between worlds. Heart pounding, Alan stepped back, his mind racing with fear and confusion. The child's gaze pierced through him, her presence filling him with a deep, inexplicable sorrow. Una and Bart stood frozen beside him, their expressions mirrored with disbelief and terror. Without warning, the child vanished into the darkness, leaving only the echo of her whispered plea hanging in the air. The forest fell silent once more, as if holding its breath in the wake of the unsettling encounter. Shaken to their core, Alan, Una, and Bart returned to the main campgrounds, their thoughts consumed by the ghostly apparition they had witnessed. They shared their experience in hushed tones, but the other counselors dismissed it as an overactive imagination or a campfire tale gone awry. Yet as the nights passed, more counselors and campers reported strange occurrences. Disembodied whispers in the cabins, flickering lights along the paths, and the sensation of being watched from the shadows. The atmosphere at Peaceful Pines Camp grew tense and uneasy, a pall of fear settling over its once lively grounds. One stormy night, as the wind howled through the trees and thunder rumbled in the distance, the counselors gathered around a bonfire for solace and comfort. They spoke of the ghostly child and the whispers that haunted their dreams, their voices tinged with fear and uncertainty. As they exchanged stories, a faint melody drifted through the trees, a mournful tune that seemed to emanate from the heart of the forest. The campers fell silent, their eyes wide with fear as they listened to the haunting melody that echoed through the night. And in that moment, as lightning illuminated the sky and rain poured down like tears, they knew Peaceful Pines Camp held secrets far darker than they had ever imagined. Secrets that whispered of tragedy and loss, of restless spirits longing to find peace in the realm between worlds.